Welcome to everyone. I'm Kelsey Wiskirkin. I'm Warp's Executive Director, and I'm so happy to see you all on Zoom today. I'm going to just briefly share Warp's website. For those of you who are new to Warp, we are an international textile networking organization. Our website is weavearealpiece.org. And if you visit our site, you'll see some of our upcoming events on the homepage here. I want to specifically mention that our 2023 annual meeting is coming up next month at Kent State University in Kent, Ohio. And we absolutely invite you to join us. If you're able to join us in Ohio in person, we would love that. And if you're not able to join in person, we also have a live broadcast day. So one of our main days of programming will be broadcasting virtually. And so we invite you to register and join us however you can. So with that being said, I'm actually going to switch over here. As you all know, today is focused on Penland School of Craft, and we decided that we would start with just a brief video about Penland.
It's really kind of the perfect place of research and experimentation at your bench, communication with your peers, your students, and then this nurturing environment.
Such a breath of fresh air. It's beautiful scenery. It just kind of is humbling.
What draws them here is the opportunity to make work in that intensive environment. You can't help but get better because you're always in the studio. The studio's open all the time, 24/7.
I took a 2-week class and was just enthralled. It was incredible.
So far, it has been the most challenging yet most fun experience that I've had in my life.
So you come here and kind of figure out what's next for you as a creative person.
I'm typically a glass blower, and I've ventured out of my comfort zone a little bit to just see what happens.
You know, whatever it is they want to do, I want to be able to give them the skills to do it.
I've never felt more confident in my work and being able to show off and showcase what I've made and really take pride in something that I've made from scratch.
It's a place of education, it's a place of learning, and it's a place of teaching, trying to become better makers and better people.
You understand that there's concentrated effort, and you won't deny yourself that when you come here.
Everybody really wants everybody else to do well, you know, and to uplift themselves and to push them to make the best work possible.
It's transformed me in so many ways. It's helped me to discover who I am as a person and what I want to do with my life, where I want to go.
I'm going to leave here with more energy and more ideas than I came with.
And the people are what make it amazing.
The community here, just the wonderful eating dinner together, having some fun social times together, the camaraderie in the studio is great.
People that you just interact with are the ones that you just don't want to ever let go. Everybody here is amazing.
I try to describe this place to people time and time again, and what it comes off sounding like is art camp. Really, you gotta just come here to know it and feel it.
This is going to be the most life-changing experience that you've ever gone through.
Craft schools, man, they're just energizing. I don't know what it is about them, but it's pretty great.
All right, well, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our 3 panelists who are all very intimate with Penland and specifically with Penland Textiles. So first up is Edwina Bringle. Edwina is a teacher and student continuing to learn and experiment after retiring as an Emerita Professor from UNC Charlotte. She works primarily in textiles, photography, and soft glass. Edwina has works held in public and private collections as well as museums, and has recently been featured in a documentary capturing her and her sister's impact at Penland. So Edwina, I would love to invite you to share about your history with Penland, how you got involved with the school.
Well, to make a long story short, I first came to Penland during Bill Brown, who was the second director. during his first year as director. My sister knew Bill Brown from Haystack School in Maine, where Lucy Morgan looked for someone else to lead the school. She told her board she was retiring, and she went and found Bill. And so his first summer, he asked friends and colleagues to come help him for 2 weeks. So Mother flew me from Memphis to Buffalo to help Cynthia drive home. And instead of coming in a straight line, we came at an angle and ended up at Penland. And in truth, I didn't have anything to do. So Bill told me to go to the weaving room, and which I, had shown an interest in. And Helen Henderson helped me get on the loom for the first time and get under it and change the treadles. And, and from that, I came back and forth for several years taking classes. And my career was as a radiologic technologist. I was not in the art. So that's that's brief.
Wonderful. Thank you, Edwina. We're so happy to have you with us today. Okay, next I'm going to introduce April Carter-Price. April has spent her adult life as a visual arts teacher in both schools and museums. She made her first visit to Penland at age 4, and on that visit met Lucy Morgan, Penland's founder. She learned to weave from Edwina and has taken and is still taking many fiber arts workshops at Penland, as well as classes in printmaking, bookmaking, and collage. And she's a member of the Tapestry Weavers South and serves on the board as their retreat chairperson. So April, welcome to you, and please share with us about how you became involved with Penland.
Okay, thank you. My first time coming up to Penland, I was about 3 years old. My grandmother, her name is Minnie Dietzel Carter, we call her Minnie D now, came up here in the 50s and took copper enameling and some other classes. She got to know one of the weavers, Miss Matson, known as Maddie, and she would come back up for visits even when she wasn't taking classes. And so she brought me up one time, and I got to meet Miss Lucy, who also knew my grandmother, in the Pines dining room. And, this nice little gray-haired lady seemed very nice, one of my grandmother's friends, but I was enthralled with the cuckoo clock that had the cuckoo coming out on the hour and then had dancers going around. So that was my first impression. Fast forward about 40 years, I was going to UNC Charlotte as a non-traditional student, which means older. I had a family and kids at the time that are all grown and gone. And I took classes with Edwina at UNCC, and we were both in the guild, Handweavers Guild together. And she came in one day and said, I'm teaching a class at Penland. We've got some scholarships, work study scholarships. Do you want to go? Do you want to apply? And I did, and a couple other people from the guild applied. And we went up, I think it was 1995. And part of the work study program was before and after each session, we cleaned and got things ready and cleaned up afterwards. So we scrubbed toilets, we made beds, we worked in the kitchen and the dining room, in addition to taking our weaving classes. Did that for about 3 years in a row, a repeat offender. And then I thought, well, I work 10 months out of the year teaching. I'm going to start saving my money. And I came back as a regular student after that. And I would start saving my money when I get back down the mountain for the next year. So yeah, and I've taken a few classes that weren't weaving, some bookmaking, printmaking, felting, things like that. But I always come back to the weaving. So it's all Edwina's fault. And by the way, she taught at UNC Charlotte for what, 25 years?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, April. Next, I'm going to introduce Danielle. Danielle Lasker is a fiber artist and current Textile Studio coordinator at Penland. Danielle holds an MFA in Fiber and Material Studies from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and a BFA in Fabric Design from the University of Georgia. Danielle utilizes weaving and the softness of fiber to explore queerness and folklore and is always on the hunt for new fiber techniques to learn. So Danielle, thank you for being with us, and we would love to hear about how you came to Penland.
Yeah, so having gone to school for textiles in Georgia, it was pretty quick to hear about Penland and to hear about the summer workshops and whatnot. So after grad school, I actually finished up in spring of 2020, and I had been hoping to be able to apply into the core fellowship, but everything was sort of cut off for a little while, as we all know. And the application for Textile Studio coordinator actually came up first, and I had to jump at the shot and immediately pack my stuff up when I received an offer and headed on down. I've spent a little over 2 years now as Textile Studio coordinator, facilitating workshops, buying lots of supplies, taking care of the oldest studio on campus, and it's been an absolute joy. So I have seen a lot of people coming in and out, and as my bio would say, I've been able to learn a lot of different textile techniques during that time here.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Danielle. So with introductions, I'm going to go ahead and screen share. We have some images from the presenter, so I'll screen share our slideshow, and we'll look at some great images of campus and of the studio. All right, so I'll go to the first slide and welcome the three of you to tell us what we're seeing here.
That's the side of the Pines Dining Hall, where people are lined up to go in for a meal. There's a buffet line for the meals, and then you go get your drink, and it's good food.
And upstairs, can you back up just the upstairs, the two windows that you can see upstairs? That was where I stayed last summer, and that was part of Miss Lucy's apartment. And I shared it with two other people because we were still kind of in lockdown, but there was a huge fireplace up there. And then another part of the other one over the portico, I think that was her bedroom area, but she lived there for, I don't know, many years.
Yeah, and Bill Brown kept that for her after he took over the school. He kept her room and living room for whenever she wanted to come visit, and that's why I was able to meet Miss Lucy Morgan.
Okay.
So Penland is northeast of Asheville, and if you fly to the school, people fly to the Asheville airport, or some of them will make plans and fly to Charlotte because they want a vehicle when they're here, which you could also rent in Asheville, but they'll rent a vehicle from Charlotte and come up the mountain.
These are, well, the one on the right there is a photograph of Miss Lucy Morgan that was at the Penland Gallery last summer when I was there, and there was a brief history of her. And then I think that's her as a younger person teaching people to weave. Is that right, Edwina?
Correct. Yeah.
And that photo on the right, you sort of see that all around campus. I believe there's a copy in the gallery, as was said, but as well as the archive, and I think in the main office as well in Lily Loom, where the weaving studios are. So you sort of see that one put all over the place. We love having her looking over us during the day-to-day operations of the school.
So after the weaving program that Lucy Morgan started with the local people, they had enough goods that they applied to go to the Chicago World's Fair to sell things and, support the program. And so this is the original log cabin is now in a covered area on campus behind where the craft house and supply store are. and there's a truck with the cabin on it. And the truck is actually not the original truck, but is the same year as the truck that hauled the cabin up to Chicago. My understanding is there was a knockdown cabin inside the cabin. So when they got there, they had two places to show the goods from.
And this cabin is lovingly called the Travelogue. It is a beautiful little log cabin, and we have stickers of it available on campus. It's the cutest little thing, and it's in this protected covered area that a workshop actually built a few years ago. It was a timber frame class, and there's photos of it in that building. You can go in and look. It's still open air, and you can see sort of what it was. But Miss Lucy decided to have that cabin built because they were actually given this really swampy patch of land up in Chicago at the World's Fair, and she thought that was unacceptable, and they needed to have like a nice little solid place to be able to display the Penland weavers and potters wares. So we have this beautiful travelogue, and it still stands on campus now. You can go and see it and read a bunch of information about where it went, what they did, as well as how that covered area was made for it.
This is from a postcard that I brought back many years ago. Vegetable dyeing expert Emma Conley and Penland founder Lucy Morgan from the 1930s. And this is either in front of or right next to the old dye shed, which is still standing. And we still use it once in a while.
And this is just one of those beautiful images that everyone hopes to come and recreate. They always want to go outside the dye shed and stir the big cauldrons and do a bunch of natural dye up there. It's gorgeous. And back here, you can see this behind scene of Lily Loom, and you can notice all the shrubs and whatnot growing around. We have a greatly curated selection of plants around campus, some of which are natural dyes that aren't necessarily harvested for workshops, but are just around in case people have a good eye to be able to know what it is, or if they're curious enough to ask our groundskeepers about the plants, they might find out that we've got some interesting natural dye ingredients growing right behind the weaving studio.
And this is just the vista that you see when you're eating in the dining hall or outside under the portico outside the pond. And another couple of views going down the steps in the fall, and another one of the ponds from the side of the clay studio.
And the mountain always changes. The weather, it's wonderful.
Here's a little inside look at the pines. Like Edwina mentioned earlier, we do buffet style meals, but it's a lot of family sit down style. You can go to one of these tables inside, but we also do have a medley of picnic tables outside if you want to get some fresh air. But it's a lot of just opportunity for folks to sit down with students from other workshops or hang out with their classmates outside of the studio. And staff also often get to eat with students and staff from around campus. And it's just a great social scene.
The Mint Museum in Charlotte a few years ago did an exhibit to celebrate Penland's 75th anniversary. And they actually took one of the dining room tables and the Lazy Susan and set up a whole table service inside the museum, along with a history timeline, which I think is back at the gallery now. But and they also took a bunch of us art teachers up for a weekend, and we took half-day classes in felt making, copper enameling, and a couple other things. And it's something that most teachers don't get to do.
Now Penland is now 94 years old.
Wow. This is a picture I took from last summer. It's not exactly on campus, but Penland, this is a Penland post office, and it's down the hill and down the road a ways, and the Estatoe River, or the Tow River, runs right by it along with the railroad tracks. And I can remember many a night when I first stayed at Horner Hall, and you could hear the train going around the rails, and you could hear them put on the brakes and things. It was very nice. And I always stopped by, I can't remember the postmaster's name, but I always buy stamps on my way back.
So this is this craft house, and it's the building that was first built with help from the weavers and their families. They had started weaving in what was then Appalachian School, which was under the Episcopal Diocese of North Carolina. And Appalachian School said, I think you're getting kind of big and maybe y'all need to move. And so the craft house was built with the community saying, I'll give a log, I'll give 2 logs, I'll give a day's work, I'll give 2 days work. And about 4 years ago, because of deterioration of some of the logs, this whole building was renovated by a company that worked in that area of the field of renovation. And my sister was out there one day looking at what was going on, and one of the foremen said, take that log out and take a 1/2 inch off of it. And this is, they were so careful with everything they did, and with the stones that were between the logs, they numbered every single one of them that came out. And now there's also, to bring it up to code, what used to be open is now a new metal fence that emulates the logs that's on the front side and back side of the building. Well, not back side, but right side.
And the building was originally chestnut, which
Yeah.
we can't get anymore because there's a chestnut blight, but they preserved as many logs as they could and restored and recreated what they couldn't. And you cannot tell the difference. But now they did a terrific job.
And one of the reasons why they were so meticulous with it, especially with the numbering of the stones and the different components, is because this is one of the many buildings on campus that's on the National Historic Register. And in order to keep that status, it needed to be put back into its original state. They couldn't just take it apart and build a new version of the craft house. It needed to still be the craft house. And as you can see here, I mean, weavers have been a part of that building since early times here at Penland. The studio is no longer in that building and we're not weaving on the porch anymore, but it's still a popular spot for students to go and visit since it houses some dormitory style housing up top, as well as our supply store downstairs. So students are still going in and out of it. They can still gain weaving knowledge by, visiting different parts of the building.
And the rocking chairs. It's a great place to sit and rock and get along with your, talk to your neighbors or have a little gathering. It's great. It's one of the best, not as good a view as from the Lily Loom House, but one of the best views on campus.
So this is from these shots are from a class that Mary Zickafus taught. ECOT and people being creative with their designs before they went into the dye pot.
Mm-hmm. So this student in particular, I feel so bad, I'm blanking on her name right now, but she made some of the most beautiful pieces, in my opinion, in the workshop. She was so meticulous and is an engineer in her own life. And I think a lot of that really technical skill came out into this technique. I mean, everyone in the workshop, this was one of our 6-week-long fall workshops. They came in and were basically all blank slates. Very few folks actually had ECOT experience at the beginning. So they were really just learning the basics of the techniques. And then by the end of that long immersive workshop, I mean, they were making some of the most beautifully complex dyed textiles that I've seen come out of the studio in quite some time. And they were just all so dedicated to it. And it's through those concentration workshops that folks are really able to dive into something for such an extensive period of time. Because if you've been to Penland before, you've probably been for one of our summer workshops that are either 1 or 2 weeks long, whereas our spring and the fall workshops, those get to be either 6 or 8 weeks long. And that is much more like a full semester style. But still with that Penland immersive nature of being every single day. You're not just going in 2 or 3 times a week. It's every day, all day, eating, breathing, drinking, weaving. And these students were so dedicated to this. It was really just amazing to walk in there every day and see the studio transform.
Just some more pictures of the weaving studio and things that can happen. The picture on the right is primarily, it's a tapestry workshop that was taught using frame looms. And, you know, a lot of people are, you know, if there's not a floor loom that they think of in their future, coming to take a frame loom tapestry workshop is fabulous. And that is, even if, you know, you can take all that information back to your floor loom if you happen to have one, but that happened to be what the class on the right is.
I think I was in that class, and I also took a 2-week class with Mary Zickafus several years ago. And first thing we did was take natural wool yarn, and she taught us how to dye a full spectrum of color. And that's what we used in our individual projects with the ikat wrapping and dyeing and over dyeing and things. So I envy you taking a 6-week class with her, Edwina. And Danielle.
So the image on the right here as well is one that has often been posted onto the Penland Textiles page on the website. And it's one that's been very special to me over the years before I even came to Penland, because that woman on the left, her name is Sephora Camille, and she is actually the woman who taught me how to weave at the University of Georgia in the fabric design department. And she is one of those voices that has spoken so well of Penland. Her, along with a jewelry artist, Mary Hallam Pierce, are two very vocal folks at the University of Georgia that just love, by word of mouth, advertising about their experience at Penland and what they're doing. So every time I would sort of pop onto the Penland page before ever coming to the school, I would see that and know that one of my mentors had had such a wonderful experience here. And it was just always one of those delightful things of seeing familiar faces. There's a lot of folks in the textile community that come here, and you'll see them either on the Instagram or the website or any of those things. And it's just a beautiful reminder of the amazing weavers we have, especially down here in the Southeast.
Well said.
Oh, here we have some more studio shots. We see some dyeing on the left. It looks like some stitch work, some piecework on the right. These two photos are taken in the upper textile studios, whereas the ones on the last slide were in the lower textile studios. So those are the upper 2 floors of the Lily Loom building. And the lower textile studio is the one that mainly houses the loom room. That's what it's normally called, but also sees some different construction techniques and also does some dye work. But upstairs, where these two pictures are taken in the upper textile studios, is primarily surface design. So we see a lot of stitch work, a lot of dye work, screen printing, all of those more surface-centric techniques rather than construction. But we do see some overlap between the two. Luckily, the studios are very adaptable. There's a lot of stuff that can be moved around, different equipment that can be brought around into either space. And both studios do have dye labs of their own. So there is a lot of dye work that can be done at the same time. For instance, this past session, in session 2, we had 2 workshops dealing with natural dye, one for making inks and one for using on wovens. And since they both had their own kitchens, they were both able to do that while still having a lot of overlap of equipment and materials and the like.
And the one on the left there was Catherine Ellis, who used to run the Haywood Community College fiber program. And she's retired now, but she's still doing natural dye experiments and sharing what she learns.
This is from Mary Zickafus's class. It was an apron.
Beautiful. And this is Susan Iverson's class several years ago on pulled warp. And what we ended up doing was putting 2 small warps on the floor loom and experimenting with the different techniques she taught us. And that way we went home with samples of the before and the after, before we pull the warp and after we pull them, which is very, very helpful in trying to explain that process to people. We also had time to do our own project as well. I think mine's kind of out of focus at the top corner on the right. We also had cake and a really good time.
This is this summer with Casale's class. Casale lives in Santa Fe, and they were doing indigo dyeing on cloth, and using a paste for resist.
So they were experimenting with cassava paste resist, and they were doing a lot of their dye work outside. So you can see in the background, that's the Lily Loom studio, and those top 2 floors where the lights are on, that's lower textiles, and then the upper textile studio. And this is actually down below, right next to the dye shed. So you can't see it, but it's a little bit off to the left of where they've set up this drying line. So still some dye action happening out there by the historic dye shed.
So this is Community Day, and I went around and took a few photos. So it's in the afternoon, either in late February or early March, and the community is invited to come in. And in many studios, you can do hands-on activity, and a lot of artists from the community and beyond. Some will drive from 2 hours away to come volunteer for Community Day. And the clay studio is in particular quite busy, with the wheels or with hand building. The middle shot is the print studio. I think this is, they set up a certain print that's going to be done, and usually go to 3 or 4 stations, so they end up with a color print. And then on the right is a glass blowing demonstration. There was not a participatory aspect of the glass studio, which is fine. I mean, there's plenty to be seen. And this is Hayden, a local, he grew up over in Silo, and his father was a glass blower, and now he's a glass blower.
I just want to say I love the one on the left with the little boy and the clay. First of all, it reminds me of my 5-year-old grandson, but in my 20 years of teaching mostly elementary art, they always loved the clay. Of course, there was always had about 100 kids a day, every kid in the school during the week. There was always one that wanted to wash his hands every 5 minutes.
And Community Day is one of those events that is hosted by our Community Collaborations Department. So in addition to having the programming side of things that run our different studios on campus and hosts the workshops that a lot of y'all are probably familiar with, we also have Community Collaborations that does things directly within the Mitchell County community that Penland resides in. So a lot of that looks like providing substitute teachers that do different art activities with students, putting on different events, hosting tents at different festivals and whatnot, but also things like this, opening up campus and intentionally inviting everyone on up to see what we're doing, participate in it. And a lot of it is getting the children really involved. The kids around here just love getting their hands messy, love showing their parents what they can do. And it's a great way to get folks to know about our kids' camps as well, because that's a wonderful activity that folks can do down at one of our other really really historic buildings down at Ridgeway. That's one of the original buildings on campus. Kids can go there all summer long, do different activities. Even during the pandemic, they were doing a lot of kits that could be mailed out to children and a lot of online activities where folks could follow along. So community collaborations is also a big part of campus and helping to get art into the hands of folks of all ages.
Wonderful. I think that's our last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing and let's see what we have in the Q&A. And if anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to put them in the chat. And we'll have a little discussion about past, present, and future of Penland. So let's see, I'll read off. The first one says, it's from Maggie saying, wondering how the community surrounding is continuing to be engaged with the programs in campus. And Danielle just spoke a bit to that. Is there anything anyone would like to add to community engagement?
Well, community is certainly invited to see the presentations in the evening that are done on campus. And there's a calendar that's posted for that. Also, there are a number of close areas to Penland, the counties where community can sign up for standby if you want to try to get in a class, which means you come in for half-price tuition. And, you know, it's a chance that you may or may not get in. And, you know, that's a wonderful program. There's kids camp in the summer, which is going on now. And people in the area often apply to teach at kids camp. And as Danielle said, with community collaborations, there's also been programming there to teach the artists to be able to go into the schools and be a substitute. The program was called Subs with Suitcases. So Penland provided the information to the artists to be on top of that and be able to go in, because they need to follow the curriculum that's going on in the schools, but yet do it with art for whatever's going on. 4th of July parade is coming up. It's actually not going to be on the 4th of July. It's going to be on the 8th. It's often a different date because it needs to reference what's going on at the school and not really interrupt the classes too much. But people come and on the lawn and have their picnics, and then they line up for ice cream. The school serves ice cream and anybody can be in the parade, you know, which comes down the road, and this maintenance staff does the fireworks, where people who work with that have to go be certified. So they all have to go to school before they can work with the fireworks crew. And the director had to go I think she had to be fingerprinted. Yeah, you know, well, it's all regulated and that's fine. The school works with it.
I want to, another thing that the community embraces at the end of every 2-week session in the summer, we have scholarship auction. And that is to raise money for the work study scholarships, and people donate their work. A lot of the studios do some sort of collaboration, and it's a big celebration as well as a great way. And then at the end of the season, they have, of course, the annual fundraising scholarship. I volunteered one time and I got to serve wine inside the tent while they were bidding on pieces. I was astounded at how high those bids went. So excellent.
We also have a local organization called the Toe River Arts Council that hosts this studio crawl sort of within the county. And there are a lot of different Penland artists that participate that, including our resident artists. And of course, Edwina and her sister also have their studio open to the public, but as well as the main Penland Gallery that also welcomes guests as they're going all around the county, exploring the different studios and galleries within the area.
Wonderful. I know that in addition to so much local community engagement, there are also many opportunities for folks who want to come the scholarship program and assistantships and fellowship. I wonder if you could give a bit of an overview of those opportunities that are available.
Yeah, so especially during the summer, more than 50% of students are receiving some type of either full or partial scholarship. Some of those have a work study requirement, some of those don't. And some of those are sponsored by the school or individual donors or funds that come directly from our different auctions. So there's a lot of different financial aid options to get involved. And there's also the organization Crafting the Future that helps provide specific scholarships, especially to students of color looking to get involved in the crafts. And there's also other folks that sponsor separate from the school their own private scholarships outside of the school to help get folks involved and sort of send them our way. In some corners of the country, folks have never heard of Penland before and they come out here for the first time, and then word of mouth just spreads it more and more. But there's a lot of growing initiatives around the different financial aid options offered by the school.
Wonderful. And we have a question from a WORT member who is joining us today from Ireland asking, is there any type of international student exchange program?
So there's not an exchange program, but there are international students more than welcome, as well as during our winter residency program. So that's another program we do have at the school, sort of during our down season, in which folks are welcome to apply to work for either 2 or 4 weeks on their own individual projects. And we do see a lot of international artists coming in for that. We also do get a number of international instructors, and that is slowly opened back up after the lockdown. For a while, that did have to be put on standstill while travel restrictions were still in place, but we absolutely welcome international students. There are a few issues with them doing work study programs due to just tax reasons and the government's restrictions on work visas and whatnot. But there are other scholarships and grants available to help support those students and artists.
Great. And I think, I'm sure those resources are outlined on Penland's website. So when we send our follow-up next week, we'll make sure to include that information for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, and the scholarships they're very broad. I mean, some of them are, you have to be over 50 years old. Some of them, say a person of color. Some of them say, well, it's, this is in clay, this is in fiber. So it's a lot to investigate on the website as far as scholarships go.
And that makes me think about, the overall diversity and acceptance of everybody here, there. You have to be 18 years old or older to be eligible to come to classes, but 18 to 80
90.
plus, 18 to 90. And they have made a concerted effort in the last few years to expand the diversity and the opportunities for people of all walks of life, of all colors and all persuasions, let's just say.
And one of those big ongoing efforts is also campus accessibility. I'm sure, as y'all can imagine, being in the mountains, we're not the most physically accessible place. And for instance, Lily Loom doesn't have an elevator. We only have chairlifts that have been put in since the need for an elevator was sort of made aware. So one of the current ongoing projects is working on the Lily Loom renovation plan that will involve an addition that has an elevator to help make the space more physically accessible to folks. And different initiatives like that are ongoing all around campus. And there's a lot of fundraising going on for that as well, because it's not the most salacious thing to go to donors and say, please help us sponsor this new elevator, whereas they would much rather sponsor new equipment, a new laser for the print studio, a new 3D printer for the glass studio, new looms. Those things tend to get a lot more attention a lot quicker. So there's a lot of ongoing different fundraising efforts to try to, make campus as accessible to folks as possible. It's very important that we allow everyone at least the opportunity to be able to get into our doors and come and see what we've got to offer.
Wonderful. There's also a question from Laura about teaching opportunities. Is there some information you can share about how interested teacher could submit a proposal or how the teachers are solicited?
Absolutely. So we are always looking for more instructors from all walks of life, all around the world, all different techniques. We have 2 staff in particular that oversee that, our different creative coordinators, particularly Courtney Dodd. She's the one that really keeps a finger to the pulse of the craft world and looks for new artists to try to see if they're interested in teaching. But we also accept teaching proposals at all times. There's a teaching page on the Penland website with information about this, on how to contact her, or on how to go to our slide room page and put in an application for teaching. It's especially helpful if you already have an idea of what type of workshop you'd like to teach and are able to put that information in. We're still working right now and getting a backlog of classes that were postponed or canceled due to COVID rescheduled for the future. So it might be a few years still while we're trying to get everyone put into place, but absolutely put in a teaching proposal if you are at all interested in participating in a Penland workshop. That information is available on the website, and we do calls every so often. But you can also always talk via email or phone call to the studio coordinator that you're interested in teaching in that workshop. So for instance, if you want to teach a textiles workshop, emailing textile@penland.org and sort of talking about what that looks like, what a good proposal would look like, that's absolutely something you can do.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. And we'll make sure we find that page as well and share that next week with our follow-up. And speaking of teachers, we have Catherine Ellis with us. I see that she wrote into the chat that she just taught a class at Penland and would love to make a comment or two about it to the group. So Catherine, welcome to you, and please feel free to unmute yourself and share with us.
Okay, thanks. I have. Edwina, Danielle, April, thanks so much. That was a great presentation about Penland. And I guess I just wanted to share, I just came from there. I've been home less than a week now, and I taught a 2-week class on dyeing and weaving along with Joy Botrop, my partner in crime. She came from Denmark, and that represents Penland finally opening up a little bit to international teachers again. But one thing I want all of you folks to understand is the unusual thing about classes at Penland is the student body itself. We had 12 students in the class. They ranged in age from 22 to well into their 70s, with varying amounts of experience, to almost none to a great deal. And that's part of the richness of these classes, is people of different ages, of different experiences, working together in a non-competitive way. And it's absolutely my favorite place to teach ever. You know, I first went there as a student in 1976, and I've been returning all these years, you know, in one form or another, often to take classes, but also to teach. So thank you again for bringing this great story to everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Catherine. Great to see you. I have a question here. Joan is asking, is Penland still exercising any COVID restrictions? Maybe someone can speak to that.
Yeah, so at this time, there are no vaccine requirements, and masking is optional on campus, but we do actively respond to the pandemic as it comes. We saw this a lot in the first 2 summers that I was here, where we would adapt our responses and our requirements as different outbreaks happened, as different waves came in. There was still a lot of variants being developed at the time, so as more information came to that, adaptations were made with campus response. But as for right now, it's pretty unrestricted on campus, but with changes being willing to be made at any point, especially if there were to be a campus outbreak, which luckily there has not been a bad instance of thus far this summer.
Yeah, there are students who even now are wearing masks, and that's fine if you want to wear a mask, but none of that is required right now. That's the student's choice. And we have a tent outside where people can, you know, besides the portico, you can go to the tent and eat, of course, and take your mask off. And that's provided for students to be more comfortable with where they are and what they want their own COVID restrictions to be.
I have a question. We wore masks last summer. That was a requirement. And I wonder, have they started, at one time they were doing tours of Penland campus once a week. Have they started that back maybe this summer?
So I actually don't think the tours are really ever going to start again as they were. We've now moved on to a walking tour system that begins with the newly remodeled visitor center up at the gallery. So with that, you sort of walk through this guide of what is around campus, a timeline of campus history, and then there is a new set of maps that features these little letters that are on each of the buildings now. So you can actually go around the map, find the letter to the corresponding building, and also read a bit of information about each building and its history or what is housed inside of it. So I think it's going to be more of the self-guided walking tours from here on out.
I think that's a good idea because, people would come through and look into the studio and see what we were doing, but that will be less disruptive of the work going on.
True.
Yeah.
I have an interesting historic question here from Donna. So Donna says, from what she understands, Lucy Morgan had a little book she made on indigo dyeing called The Blue Pot. Is that at Penland or Western Carolina? Any of you know about the Blue Pot?
No, I don't.
I don't.
I mean, there was a Penland dye book published, but that was Mrs. Emma Conley. And when Katie Lewis came in, Miss Katie Lewis came in to help Emma Conley. She rewrote the first Penland dye book and made it more extensive. And then in recent years, and G. McLaughlin was Penland director for 20 years. I can't remember if it was at the end of her time or that the Penland dye book was republished, and that's available in the school supply store. But I never heard of the Blue Book. If somebody has more information, archives would love to know about it. And Danielle has spent quite a bit of time in the archives, and I don't believe she's seen that either.
I don't believe so. We have a Penland archive on campus. We don't currently have an archivist, but folks can still schedule visits to the space. And it houses a lot of documents from the school's history, a number of beautiful photos, some of which are taken by Edwina, as well as a number of different historic objects from the school. And I'm afraid I don't think I've come across that yet, but I'm going to have to keep an eye out because that sounds fascinating.
Right.
And the Penland dye book, is that something that can be ordered online? Can people purchase it without coming to campus? It sounds really.
Yeah, you could send a note to Penland and it would be forwarded to the person who's heading up the supply store, and they would take care of that, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We have a question from Maggie. So Maggie is asking, can you please briefly talk about visitor accommodations for the weeks-long sessions?
That's all noted in the catalog or on the website. As far as staying on campus, you can ask for a dormitory room, a double, a single with a bath. They're all different prices and they include the meals. If you do stay off campus, you can sign up for whatever meals that you would like to take. So there's several options there as far as staying and taking a class on campus. If you stay off campus, there are some B&Bs that you really should investigate, but that's true all over the country. As far as that goes, but most people stay on campus.
Great, thank you, Edwina. So we have just a few minutes left. We're getting close to time to wrap up. Given that this is focused on the past, present, and future of Penland Textiles, I wonder if we could close maybe with a little bit about the future of Penland. Are there any discussions about future plans, or what would each of you say about that?
Well, I think what Danielle brought up, is part of the future of textiles is raising money and figuring out what will happen with the Lily Loom building. Because once you get into any kind of renovation, you've got to bring it up to code, which is much more difficult in today's world than if it was done 20 years ago, for instance. But having the chairlift, I was in a class. I still take classes, especially with photography or even weaving. You put your head in a different place when you go take a class, and so that makes it interesting when you come back to your own studio and see what's going on. But having that chairlift has allowed several people to be able to take a class at Penland. One gal was in a terrific accident that was not her fault and had a prosthetic lower leg, and she was able that way to take the weaving class. So that was, fabulous to see. And she's not the only one. Even during Community Day, we had one of the volunteers sitting on the landing, directing people how to use the chairlift so they could come up to the studio. But Penland classes are very diverse. It could be a lot about indigo with Casale, and during that same time, it was a sculptural basket class that was going on in that studio there. So Penland has no standing faculty. It changes all the time. Does that help?
That's great. Yes, thank you. And I just saw Gloria wrote into the chat that Phyllis would like to say something. So Phyllis, please, if you'd like, unmute yourself. We'd love to hear from you.
Hey, am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I wrote a book about weaving centers in Appalachia in the early 20th century, and there's a chapter on the early years and the founding of Penland School. And it's published by the University Press of Kentucky, and it's still available in paperback from the University Press. But if you want a hardback, you can often find one on the secondary used book market.
Wonderful. Thank you, Phyllis. We'll make sure to, in next week's follow-up email, also include the information for your book. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. And it's so good to see you. And before we close, I want to share that this monthly panel discussion program that has become really a staple of Warp's programming started with Phyllis in the early COVID days. It was her idea, and she was the original committee member. So Phyllis, thank you for that. And it's so good to see you.
Yes, well, I'm glad you're carrying on with it.
We are too. It's really such a nice way to still, even though we've returned mostly to normal, it's still nice to connect with each other this way virtually once a month. So and with that, I'll go ahead and thank Edwina, Danielle, and April for your wonderful overview of Penland today. It's so nice to get to hear from each of you. And thank you to everyone who joined us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.